Analyzing the Gettysburg Address. First, I would like to provide some helpful historical context. In this very month, on November 19, 1863, a memorial was held to honor the fallen Union soldiers who had lost their lives in the Battle of Gettysburg. This battle was considered to be a turning point by many in the Civil War between the Union of the North and the Confederacy of the South. Prior to this day, January 1, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This proclamation would abolish slavery and allow black men to join the Union's military forces. This day was one of mourning for many Americans, and Edward Everett's speech was meant to commemorate all those who had lost their lives. While Everett's speech lasted 2 hours, Lincoln's only lasted a few minutes. Although his words were few, the Gettysburg Address is a speech of notoriety to the present day. What made Lincoln's words so memorable? And what did he hope to achieve through his speech? To gain perspective on how he appealed to his audience and his intentions behind the piece, we must look to the speech itself. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of it as a final resting place for those who died here, that the nation might live. This we may, in all propriety, do, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have hallowed it, far beyond our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, while it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who have fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we must take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Very powerful words said by President Abraham Lincoln. But now I would like to shift the focus to what made the Gettysburg Address so effective. Moving on to rhetorical devices, repetition was key. Lincoln utilized the repetition at the beginning of the phrase, "We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow," to emphasize the power of those who had died during this battle. And this is an example of specifically the rhetorical device of anaphora. Notably, Lincoln uses the word 11 times, we, 11 times throughout his piece, and he does this to establish either common experiences with the audience or to share values that they should both hold. Meanwhile, apostrophe is repetition at the end of the phrase, and this is seen at Lincoln's conclusion when he says of the people, by the people, and for the people, and emphasizes the reality that the American government was founded to be run by the people. Antithesis is another powerful rhetorical device that he uses often, and this is stating contrasting ideas in a phrase. It reveals a subject's important matter that they wish to address. He does this when he says, "a final resting place for those who died, so the nation might live." When he contrasts death and life, the audience is reminded of the sacrifice of so many to ensure the continued values of America, such as freedom, equality, and liberty. Lincoln uses many other devices within the Gettysburg Address, such as allusion, personification, and metaphors that remind the audience of America's past. Moving on, I would like to address how President Lincoln appealed to his audience. Lincoln did this through a number of methods, including using logos, ethos, and pathos. Perhaps most his effective of the three would be ethos. Lincoln made himself appear more knowledgeable by referencing the authority of the American government that is gifted through the founding documents. In his introduction sentence, he says, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He details in the founding document such values are protected, such as liberty and equality, which he does mention. Then he says that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom. Freedom is another value that is referenced in the important founding document, the Declaration of Independence. And by stating the importance of God, he also relates to the audience on a level because many people held a belief in God. Not only this, he also strengthens the authority of the U.S. by referencing God. Finally, he uses pathos by referencing the sacrifice of the soldiers throughout. President Lincoln attempts to inspire emotions of hope, sadness, pride, and continued courage in his audience. He does this when he says, "It is for us the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced." By using words such as noble, honored, and devoted, he instills a sense of pride for those who have sacrificed themselves and hopes that the people in the audience will continue to have a sense of pride. He calls upon the Union and American people to continue to show courage in the face of conflict. And in regards to logos, he logically claims that the effects of the Civil War lead to the commemoration of all those who have lost their lives, and he does this throughout the process of setting up his speech. In closing, I now ask you to reflect on the intent of President Lincoln's words. Perhaps the most obvious reason as to why he wrote the speech was to honor the Union's fallen members, more specifically perhaps to motivate the Union people of the North to fight for the cause, to continue to fight. I believe that Lincoln spoke to both sides engaged in the war. For one, his language does not exclusively refer to the dead brave men, living and dead, as those who fought for the Union. He also emphasizes so many deaths were not in vain, and this shows a recognition that the loss of a nation is seen as a whole rather than that of one side over another. Lincoln does not direct blame in his speech, but instead focuses on values that America must continue to uphold. This is stating the importance of what the Civil War is about. And finally, his usage of inclusive verbiage, such as we, our, and nation, represent a holistic, united front rather than dwell on divisions that will continue to polarize the two sides. President Abraham Lincoln hoped to remind the Union and Confederates alike that human equality, freedom, and justice were values unique to the American government. He alludes that the Civil War is a test that will determine the future of the democracy as well as other democracies. The brevity of his words do not do a disservice to his message. He had hoped that the North and South could become united again. The part his speech played in history is best remembered by the words of Bostonian Senator Charles Sumner following his death. He declared Lincoln was wrong when he said, "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here." Instead, he argued, the world will note at once what he said and will never cease to remember it. The battle itself was less important than the speech. Thank you.